Hi everyone, this is Jimmy Yager with the BedTime Podcast. I'm here with my sidekick, Ryan McCarthy.
Hi guys, welcome to the introduction episode of the BedTime Podcast. We are the first and only podcast made for you to listen to while you're falling asleep. The subject of our podcast is going to be simple. We have a Twitter, @BedTime Podcast. During this podcast recording, Jimmy specifically is going to be illustrating a scene, a painting, a visual art for you to enjoy. And we're going to talk through that. While Jimmy's in that process, we're going to hold a discussion, talk about his art, and we're going to just have a lively conversation. Now, at that podcast Twitter, I'll say it again, @BedTime Podcast on Twitter, we will post the final illustration for you before the episode goes up, so you can go and check it out yourself. Trust me when I say this is a masterclass of art. Now, I've done enough talking as a sidekick, and I'm going to kick it back to our head illustrator and host, Jimmy Yager. Jimmy, tell us what you'll be drawing today.
So today I'm be drawing my sidekick Ryan's first car, which was a
1993 Mercury Cougar.
And this thing was a beast, if you don't mind me saying.
Mm-hmm.
So first I'm going to start off with drawing the hood of the car. Here I am, getting the perfect measurements out, and I'm drawing this line of the hood. As you can see, it's got a nice straight line to it. There we go. Oh, messed up. Gotta erase it.
That's okay. Mistakes happen. Life happens.
Yep. Alright, starting all over. Doing one straight line of the hood. Perfect. And now, I'm making the roundabout of the grill.
I notice you went through that hood kind of quickly. Are you going to add more detail later on the hood?
I am going to add more detail. I'm going to add different shading, coloring, and I'm also going to add more shape to it.
Okay, why don't you go ahead and continue illustrating the grill?
Okay.
As you can hear, that's my cat Remington meowing in the background. My apologies if you end up hearing him. Either way, he'll be out soon, so nighty-night. While Jimmy draws more of the details of the hood of the car and the grill, I'm going to tell some secrets, some stories maybe, and describe the Cougar for you. Now, the Mercury Cougar was made in 1993, but I got my edition of the car in 2013. I was 16 years old and had just gotten my license. And my older brother at the time had had the Cougar throughout his high school years, which was given to him by my grandfather, who got it in the 1990s. Now, Jimmy, our illustrator, described it as a beast. That's exactly a fitting term. It was a tank incarnate. The Cougar was very reliable. Every year during the coldest winter days, it was the only vehicle to start on the first try. The vehicle was so strong, numerous wiffle balls had hit maybe at upwards of 100 miles per hour at it. We play very extreme wiffle ball, and there was never a dent on it. In fact, if I were to run into a building while driving in the Cougar, I would fear first for the occupant's safety rather than my own safety. It was eggshell white. It had come originally as ice white, but time had eroded it, I believe? Eroded, yeah. Into an eggshell white coloring. My grandfather also loved to smoke cigars, so the fine, silky velvet interior smelled of cigars. It was very, very luscious on the inside. In fact, the passenger side door, when you slammed it shut, a conveyor belt to your top right would bring your seatbelt across your chest for you in a motorized mechanism that made many people feel very safe, honestly. It It was like the most luxurious kidnapping possible, if I would say so.
I felt safe.
Jimmy, what are you drawing now, if I may ask?
So right now, I just finished the lights, the grill, and the hood. Now right now, I'm moving over to the wheel well. And I'm forming that wheel well very nicely.
That is very nice. You put a lot of detail on the lights. I'm surprised, but it seems like you're coming back to the hood later. But the lights absolutely look like you put your heart out into that, which is normal for your art. I'm not going to beat around the bush, and the viewers will know that we're friends, but on top of that, I'm an admirer of your art.
I don't fool around with my art. My art's like my passion project to me.
Yeah, no. And passion drives success, and your art has been a success.
Yes,
I do say so myself.
Thank you. Just like this drawing is going to be.
The Cougar was rusting on the underside of it. There was a large growing of, like ivy on a wall. It was rust climbing up from the bottom of the vehicle. If you slam the driver's side door, rust could fall off at the bottom. In what some would call a safety hazard, but what Jimmy and I called endearing. The vehicle, it was a 2-door with space in the back to fit 5. 5 total, not 5 in the back alone. A spacious trunk, all of which was velvety. The coverings of the car was very, very soft. Very relaxing, very comfortable. There were some great memories with the Cougar. My first dates were taken in the Cougar. Some of the first times me and Jimmy got to do our adolescent rebelliousness was confounded by the Cougar as a transport. Do you have any specific memories of the Cougar that you would like to share?
I do. On most Friday nights, me and Ryan would go ding-dong ditching. I can't say who we would ding-dong ditch because it could get us jail time. But anyways, back to my drawing. So right now, I just finished doing the front undercarriage of the hood of the car. And I'm about to draw the roof of the car as I move my pencil across. I'm being ever so delicate with it.
Ever so lightly.
And I'm just gently, because if you mess up, you can erase, and you don't want to leave any pencil marks. Because everyone makes mistakes. And right now, I'm about to draw the hood decal of the Cougar. So here is the big C for Cougar. Looks very nice. And there's a little stem holding it up, keeping it up, because that thing was on the car and it never fell off for all the years that we had it.
No, it never did.
Nope. And when Ryan had to turn it in, he wanted to steal it, but that thing was not coming off because it was sturdy. So now I'm moving my way to the passenger side door. The passenger side door was angled just a little bit in the front because of the window. And right by the window on the passenger side was the passenger side rear view mirror. So I'm drawing that in right now, getting that perfect shape of it. And now something to remember is I'm drawing this all by memory.
Yeah.
Yep, so it's very accurate. And now, after that, I'm going to draw the undercarriage part of the vehicle so I can get the door. So I'm drawing in the door.
I almost wish if you were less of an artist, we could do a follow-along video for the fans at home. But I genuinely don't believe that it is possible to get the delicate, sensitive brush strokes that you are doing correct in a timely fashion for any novice or amateur artist. When you were talking about doing the details of the hood of the vehicle, I realized that there was a story that I'd love to share of it, which is during the first spring that I had the vehicle. It was a very rainy day. It was April, and as we all know, April showers do bring Mayflowers. The Mayflower was a ship that Christopher Columbus arrived on. So while I was driving on that fateful April rainy day, I was going to work, and I was inside of the car, and I realized that it was still raining. which is odd because, as we all know, it doesn't rain inside of cars. Well, the roof of the car was dripping water at a very high rate, very fast. And I realized that there was nothing for me to hold on top of the water hole except for my finger. So I used my finger to plug the hole in the car's roof. There wasn't a direct hole where you could see sunshine, but there was a large amount of water swelling on the roof and then pouring down. Luckily, I worked about 5 minutes away. Thankfully, there were no stoplights, only stop signs. So I got to work with a very wet finger, but what else is new for work? James, how are we doing on the progress of the drawing so far? I notice you're putting on some more finishing touches.
The drawing is going very good. I would say that right now, I just finished the front. Almost finished the front. Mm-hmm. I still got more detail to put in. Mm-hmm. I still got to do the middle of the vehicle and the back. And I still would like to put some interior designs on it.
That would be lovely if you could get that velvety seat cushions in there as well.
I would love to do that. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so right now, I'm doing the undercarriage of the back half of the vehicle. Just guiding my brush ever so lightly along. Now, I don't really know the exact length of this vehicle. I can't remember.
Some would say 15 meters, maybe 30 meters long.
Yeah.
We, of course, don't know the imperial system. But anyways, go on with what you're adding detail to now, if you will.
So I'm adding detail to the back end of the bottom of the vehicle. Mm-hmm. And I'm doing the passenger side rear wheel well. So here I am making that final curve over, getting those edges, getting the shading in. I'm going to add some shading in right now, actually, as I'm...
That's bold.
It is
bold. A bold decision to do shading this early into the process, but
I couldn't stop myself.
I trust you. You need that almost animalistic inhibition within you. It's instincts, really, that drives this passion project.
And so now, I'm drawing the rest of the back of the vehicle, and now I'm going right up to the back end. I'm not going to show the rear of this vehicle. Mm-hmm. So I'm only going to have... So you can only see the top of it almost in the painting.
Mm-hmm. Subtle, yes.
Very subtle. But you know it's there.
Oh, yeah. Oh, of course. Mm-hmm. You have to have faith in your perspective.
Yes, you totally do.
I'd like to share another story of the Cougar for you.
Please do.
The Cougar was known as a death trap within its time, or a clunker. That's because the first date I ever went on, the first adult date, I'd say, I had just turned 16 and got my license, and I drove a town over in the middle of October to visit a girl and take her out, who knows where, maybe for ice cream, really. But as I drove over, I realized that it was getting colder because it was October, and nobody had explained to me the air conditioning in the car, as all I knew was that the heat worked, but the AC did not. So, as I drove over, the window began fogging up, and I blamed it on the foggy atmosphere at 6 p.m. in October. And I parked outside of her house and wiped down the window, saying, "Wow, why is it so foggy on the inside, too?" I had thought that it was because I opened a window to let some of the fog out. As we began driving, she quickly began questioning my vehicle because the window was almost unseeable, and I hit a curb very quickly. I drove us about a street over until I reached a Jewel Osco parking lot, where I parked and realized you have to hit the snowflake button in order to get cool air, and that because it was warm out in an October night, I didn't need warm air hitting the windshield, causing it to fog over. But that's enough of that story. We didn't end up dating, but that's enough of that story. Now I'm going to move over to my illustrator extraordinaire. Jimmy, what are you drawing now?
I just finished up the back end of the vehicle. Mm-hmm. I was guiding my way towards, and I was just going to finish up drawing the roof of the vehicle, actually. You can see I'm jumping around from part to part of the vehicle. Mm-hmm. I'm not going in a very systematic way. I kind of just,
it's like jazz,
yes,
if you will. It's like a jazz ensemble.
One beat at a time.
Say like, the roof is a saxophone, played by Jonathan Coltrane.
And the grill is like a trumpet played by
Louis Armstrong. And the roof, the wheel actually, is a lot like John Philip Sousa creating and naming the tuba, which he named after himself, actually, the John Phillips tuba. So, why don't we head back to you and see what detail you're adding now?
Yes. So right now I'm adding in the rear passenger side door, which you can't forget was a very peculiar door, mainly because it opened like a suicide door, if you know what I'm talking about.
It went upwards for some reason. It never made sense what the Cougar was going to do. The Cougar was its own family member. You had to treat it with respect, despite the fact that it was clearly past its prime, and some would say in the act of dying constantly. But it started up, it ran, it took a lot of gas, but it got me to and fro. And that's all you could really ask for when you're a 16-year-old, is transportation to adulthood.
A reliable vehicle.
A reliable vehicle as well.
But anyways, I'm finally starting the rear passenger side wheel, which was a very special wheel to all of us because this vehicle was what would you call it when the vehicle drives from the rear side or the back wheels spin?
A back wheel drive.
Yes, thank you, Ryan.
Not a front wheel drive or a four-wheel drive.
Which is always something you prefer more out of a vehicle up here in the snow areas where we live.
Can you explain why?
Because when it's a front wheel, it spins out more like uncontrollably. With the back wheels, you can control a lot more, control where you are steering, because the front wheels do the steering. So anyways, I am finally making the rear side of the vehicle, and I'm guiding it up towards the back window, and then up to the roof. And would you look at that?
Wow.
Would you look at that sketching?
That is such fine detail, already in the early stages of this draft as well.
Thank you, yeah. So I took a lot of art classes when I was in high school. And they definitely got me prepared for my art. And my art is mostly a very abstract piece of art. It's not, and it's a little bit of mix of realism too, as you can see in this drawing.
Exactly, yeah.
And as any of you who look it up on our Twitter, you'll see the mix between my abstract and realism. And so now I'm drawing the blend from the back door to the vehicle, which was a very subtle blend. If you remember, I almost camouflaged in with the egg white of the vehicle. And I'm going to get that little shading because now I am only doing the fine details. Oh, and I almost forgot the driver's side wheel. It's a very important thing not to forget because you need 4 wheels to drive, not 2.
I should say your art is a lot like you're not creating art for anybody. It's not for the janitors, it's not for the custodians, and it's not for the cleaners. You're drawing art for the intellectual, for the art historian, for the other artists of the world who are at your level. You're not drawing for the amateurs either, because they're probably janitors. It's imperative that they understand your style, but also understand that what you do isn't easy.
No.
And it's not something that you can do if you aren't a deeply driven intellectual person before you're an artist. But you continue that within your art.
I do. What people have to realize is this is very personal art to me, you know? And anyone who appreciates the hard work someone puts into something will understand this drawing, this painting also.
Yeah. We could also give some backstory to you. You have distant family who are art teachers and people who work at very prestigious art academies around here as well.
Yes, my mom is actually an art teacher at a school. My uncle works in art restoration at a museum in the city.
Very important work and very underappreciated work, just as the fine arts are in today's world.
Yeah, very much so.
I know this is a podcast for sleep, but I'd like to divulge now that we really are an artist podcast as well, an intellectuals podcast, the mathematicians, the geologists, the geographists. Everybody can be attained under this podcast because we have a very diverse record.
I also think we are a appreciationists podcast for anyone who appreciates things.
We're very good with language, for language arts professors as such, and as many ever so. We're very good with our grammar. We work really good with words, and that's imperative for when you're in a podcast relationship as well, and then for. Why don't we turn over to the illustrator again and hear what you're doing now?
Right now I'm drawing the details on the hood. So the hood wasn't just a completely flat hood. The hood had little curvatures to it.
Divots, if you will.
Yes. And that's what I'm drawing in. You know that I can't just draw straight lines because that would be very crude and childlike. So what I'm doing is I'm going to add some shading into these divots.
Very good.
Adding in this detail. You can almost see those divots and those ridges pop out of this drawing. That's looking very good. Now I'm going to add some black to that, for the shading, some grays. Oh. And those of you at home, when you look this up, you can try and draw it yourself too. But it probably won't come out just like mine.
No. To be honest, it's a very uphill battle to try to recreate this drawing.
It is, very much so.
Uphill, like the Battle of Gallipoli in World War I, where Australian and New Zealand troops from the British Empire landed on a peninsula in Turkey, and in a literal uphill battle, ran up hills towards Turkish troops, which were firing on them in immense numbers, and ended with millions of dead young men on both sides, and no ground change.
And that's basically how drawing my art is. It's very hard to accomplish. So anyways, back to my drawing. So right now this drawing has some details. And the thing about this vehicle is the vehicle was a 93 Cougar. And Ryan, when would you say that you acquired this? When did you start driving it? What was the year?
Late 2013, most likely.
So I would say that it definitely had some wear and tear to it. Just a little bit of love to it.
It had been 20 years old by the time that I was driving it.
Older than Ryan himself.
Oh, yeah. I absolutely older than me. In spirit, personality, and mind at the time. Yeah, of course, now I have the mind. Some would say of a 50-year-old man. Some would say of a chess champion.
Or of a 93-year-old Cougar.
Yeah, some would say that. Actually, most would say that.
Yes, they would. And so anyways, back to my drawing. So as I was saying, this vehicle has seen a lot. And since Ryan didn't get it brand new, and we both remember it, this vehicle wasn't pristine when we had it. So I'm putting on some rust on the bottom of it. Some stains on the hood. There's a huge stain on the hood.
The fine details that made it a strong vehicle, if you will.
But you know what? It was probably one of the best vehicles that either of us have ever been in.
All of our young adolescent memories are in that vehicle. None of losing my virginity was in that vehicle, but...
I think you did that out of respect for me and the Cougar.
I agree. It was a shared vehicle, really. Because you didn't start driving until
I was about 17.
Half year later, maybe?
Yes.
So those 6 months were very imperative to the Cougar's life because there were no other options. It was Cougar or bust, if you will. And the Cougar was very busty. But moving on, why don't we hear some more about what are some of your thoughts about this illustration now?
So right now I'm debating on whether or not I should draw anything on the inside of the vehicle. And what I was thinking of drawing, because this is how I remember the vehicle, is of you driving it and me in the passenger seat. Should I do this?
You know what? That's a bold and a brash choice to make as an artist. But I believe that you should go for it.
I believe so too. It's what I feel.
I feel it as well. And I know that your illustration will be tied to a memory.
Yes.
If I could bring it back one specific memory while you illustrate the two of us, I would like to tell the time of when the Cougar died. The Cougar died in, when was it? 2014?
I'll say 2015.
Really?
Yes, because it was right at the end
Yes.
of our senior year.
Yes. At the end of it, wasn't it?
Yes.
All right, so we had graduated high school. The Cougar had got us through our early adolescence. And as high school drew to a close, there was still snow on the ground at this point in time. I parked upon the street where I usually parked, but there was snow underneath the vehicle. Jimmy and I went down to the basement and began going through our shenanigans as we did at 17 and 18 years old. And my father yelled down to me, "Ryan, my God, how long were you driving that vehicle? It's so unsafe." And I replied, "It's always been unsafe. What are you talking about?" But he said, "Ryan, the brake lines on the Cougar aren't working." Well, fear ran through me like dread in the dead of night when you hear a stranger at the door. I quickly realized that the Cougar might be on its final hours and knocking on heaven's door just as that stranger upon mine. My father had gone to take the Cougar for an emissions test, but he quickly realized that the brake lines were barely working. It took a number of seconds to get it to brake. So, we made the brash decision that my father and I were to drive it, me following him, to a local caretaker of vehicles to see if he could help veterinarian the car back to life. We drove it there together, and my father was braking hard the entire time, almost shifting every time he had to brake. Shifting to the right or left, excuse me. I believe it was to the right. But a day later, we got the call that the Cougar had to be returned. When asked for a reason, they said that when put up upon the inspection line, pieces of the Cougar started to fall from the bottom of it, and it was deemed unsafe for work and unsafe to drive. That, of course, was heartbreaking to me, so I chose to be the one to drive it home that day. And as I drove, I quickly realized, in screaming agony, that the brake line on the left side was cut, and only the right side was braking, causing the car to shift horribly in one direction as it broke. Luckily, I lived 3 streets away from that caretaker of vehicles, a mechanic, if you will. And in pain, I realized that soon the vehicle would be shipped off to a junkyard, like so many other vehicles that had become leftover, yes, or irreplaceable to these young adults.
Something about this vehicle is something we never forgot. We still talk about it today, even in 2018.
Mm-hmm.
Almost a whole 3 years later.
Yeah. It was a family member.
It was one of us.
It was one of us. It was a trio of Ryan, Jimmy, and the 1993 Cougar. I still remember that fond day before the tow truck came to take it away. We were notified that today was the day that the Cougar was being picked up, so I called Jimmy over, and we sat for hours inside that vehicle talking about our favorite memories, looking at ourselves in the sunspot mirrors. You can pull down those shaders. I've never looked better in my life than I did in that mirror. It was truly a magical experience. You were in a different world in that car. We took details of the car, the license plates. I took the front, Jimmy took the back license plate. I took the Cougar ornament and the school parking decal and have those in my room still. It was like taking medals off of a dead German soldier in World War II and bringing them back home. They were trophies. They were beautiful, and I will cherish them forever, as my grandkids will, and I'm sure Jimmy's grandkids will as well.
They will. And so back to my drawing. Now, I have actually just finished my drawing. I can't wait for all of you to look this up on our Twitter to see that it's so much more than what we have talked about, because only words can barely describe what I have just drawn here.
That's at BedTime Podcast as well. You say only words can describe.
Cannot.
Cannot, excuse me.
It's a very visual drawing, but I try my best to describe everything that I'm doing.
After years of art school, I struggle to come up with any comprehension of this drawing. It is that advanced.
All the different shading techniques, the lines, and now I do this all by freehand. So...
Impressive.
Yes, it's very impressive. You see, a skill that I've learned is you don't watch where the pencil is, but where it is going.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And as you can see, Ryan, I added us in the vehicle.
I'm very happy with that. James, Anthony Yager, why don't you sign your John Hancock, put your autograph on that, we'll take a photo, and we'll soon have it uploaded. As this podcast will be uploaded, you can follow us on YouTube and SoundCloud, and especially follow us on Twitter for live updates. Thank you guys so much. Signing off, I'm the sidekick, Ryan McCarthy.
I'm the host and illustrator, Jimmy Yager.
The masterpiece is complete, and as such, so is this podcast, as well as, we hope, you're asleep by now. Good night. We'll see you in the morning.